I still remember the day the laughter stopped echoing in our house. Before that day, my world was sunlight and songbirds. My name is Bucum, and once, I was the happiest girl in the brightest village you could ever imagine. People used to call me the gem of our village. Wherever I went, smiles followed. My parents, wealthy, generous, loved by all, gave me everything a child could dream of. We had a mansion so wide it caught the wind when it sighed. Inside were rooms filled with color, music, and the scent of roasted yams and honeyed tea. Outside, the land stretched forever, fields of cassava and sugarcane, trees that danced when the wind passed through their leaves. But even in that paradise, there was one door we never opened. One room that stayed silent when everything else sang. It was at the far end of the east corridor, a thick wooden door, carved with strange shapes that looked like eyes. My mother always said, "Never go near it, Bucum. It is not meant for you." I was too young to question her, too in love with her laughter to disobey. But every time I passed it, my heart beat faster. That door had a heartbeat of its own. I used to think it was where they kept treasures, my father's gold rings, or maybe some magical fruit that made people kind. But sometimes, in the still hours of night, when the lanterns dimmed and the crickets whispered, I heard something from behind that door. A slow, dragging sound. Like a sigh that never ended. My parents never talked about it. Until they were gone. It happened 2 years ago, but it still feels like yesterday, the day the river took them away. They had gone across the big blue river to visit friends in another village. I had stayed behind because I wasn't feeling well. I remember my mother's last touch, warm and soft on my cheek. "Rest, my jewel," she said. "We will be back before sunset." But the sun went down, and they never returned. The next morning, men came running from the riverbank. Their faces said it before their mouths could form the words. The canoe had capsized. The water had swallowed them whole. I don't remember falling. I only remember the sound of my own scream and the taste of salt on my tongue, my tears, endless and bitter. The whole village went silent for days. The market closed. Even the birds sang softer. People brought food, hugs, kind words that did nothing to fill the emptiness in my chest. My parents had been loved by everyone, but no one loved them as I did. No one could understand what it felt like to be left in a house too big for one small heart. After the morning, after the drums stopped beating, the quiet came. It was the kind of quiet that listens to your thoughts and repeats them louder. I couldn't bear to walk through the house. Every corner still carried their laughter. Every cup, every chair, their scent. And the locked door. It seemed to whisper louder now. Sometimes I caught myself standing before it, my hand reaching for the lock without knowing why. The key was hidden, I knew that much. Somewhere safe, my father once said. But safe for who? Months passed. The house grew emptier. The servants who had been with my family for years slowly left. Some out of sorrow, others out of fear. They said strange things, that the house was haunted, that the spirits of my parents roamed the halls, that the forbidden room was cursed. I tried not to listen. But at night, when the wind howled and the lamps flickered, I could swear I heard my mother's voice calling my name, from behind that door. I wasn't alone for long. The village elders insisted I couldn't live alone in such a big place. They sent 2 helpers, a pair of twins known across the land for their loyalty and cheerfulness. Simi and Abu. Simi was sunshine in a human form, bright, curious, and kind. Her laughter could wake even the laziest morning. Her twin brother, Abu, was quieter, steady hands, sharp eyes, a heart that listened before it spoke. Together, they moved like one breath. When they arrived, my house felt alive again. Simi filled the air with her songs, and Abu fixed every broken thing my grief had left to rot. Slowly, the house began to heal, or so I thought. They respected every rule, especially about the locked door. They swept around it, dusted the walls near it, but never dared to touch it. Yet I could see the same question burning in Simi's eyes that had haunted me since childhood. "What's behind that door, Miss Buckham?" she asked one afternoon while arranging flowers for my parents' remembrance ceremony. I froze. My hand tightened around a petal until it tore. "That room is fine," I said quietly. "It doesn't need cleaning. And you must promise me, both of you, never try to open it." Simi nodded, but her gaze lingered on the door longer than I liked. That night, I couldn't sleep. I dreamed of water, rising fast, cold and dark. My parents reaching out for me, their hands dripping with riverweed, their eyes filled with warning. When I woke, the air was heavy, thick with something unseen. The house was whispering again. No, not the house. The door. The next day, preparations for the ceremony filled every room. Guests would soon arrive to honor my parents' memory. Simi and Abu worked tirelessly, sweeping, polishing, decorating. But whenever I passed the east corridor, I saw Simi's eyes flicker toward the forbidden room. Once, I caught her standing near it, her fingers brushing the wood. "Simi!" I called sharply. She jumped back as if burned. I wasn't, I was just. "Don't," I said. "Please. Some things must stay closed." She apologized, but I could feel the curiosity still humming in her veins like a song she couldn't stop singing. That evening, the wind picked up. The air was restless. Candles flickered without reason. I felt it again, the strange pull, the heartbeat of the locked room, calling softly, steadily, like a drum from the other side. I pressed my ear against the wood. At first, nothing. Then, a faint sound. A woman's sob. My blood turned to ice. I stepped back, heart pounding, and whispered, "Mama?" No answer. Just silence. And then, the faint click of something moving inside. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't sleep that night. But one thing I knew for certain, the room wasn't empty. And whatever was behind that door, it had finally heard my name. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination. That the sob I'd heard was a trick of the wind, or maybe the echo of my dreams. But deep down, I knew better. The house had changed. Every night after that, I heard something new, a faint hum, a rustle, a dragging sound like cloth over stone. Sometimes, it came from the hall. Other times, from deep inside the forbidden room. I stopped walking down the east corridor altogether. I took my meals in the courtyard, bathed in the outdoor shed, and slept with the lamps lit. But fear has a way of finding its own door, even when you lock everyone. The day of the remembrance ceremony came, and with it, the whole village. Men and women in bright wrappers filled my yard. Drummers beat slow, mournful rhythms, and the air smelled of roasted plantain and palm wine. Everyone came to honor my parents, their kindness, their laughter, their generosity. But I could barely smile. My heart was heavy. I felt them near me, not in spirit, but in warning. Simi and Abu had worked harder than anyone. Simi's hair was wrapped in golden cloth, her eyes sparkling with pride as guests admired our decorations. She had such a warm presence that people kept blessing her. "You're a good child," they said. Abu, quiet as ever, moved among the guests, refilling water pots and sweeping the dust no one else saw. By evening, the music softened. The elders gathered under the mango tree to speak prayers for my parents. I stood before them, holding a white candle, my voice trembling as I said, "May their souls rest where the river cannot reach." When the last drumbeat faded, I thought I heard something, soft but clear, from the east corridor. A whisper. "Buckham." I dropped the candle. The flame died, snuffed out by the night breeze. Simi rushed over. "Are you okay?" I nodded quickly. "Yes, I just thought I heard something." But I couldn't lie to myself. The voice had called my name. And it wasn't my imagination. It was my mother's voice. That night, after everyone left, I sat by my window watching the moon paint silver lines on the courtyard. I could hear the twins talking in the kitchen. Simi's voice was hushed but excited. "I'm telling you, Abu. Something is inside that room. I heard sounds last night. It wasn't the wind." Abu sighed. "You always hear things, Simi. Leave it alone." The mistress said. "I just want to peek. One peek. Maybe it's an animal, or maybe." "No." His tone was final. "Some secrets are heavy. Too heavy to touch." They fell silent. I should have gone out there and told them to forget it. But I didn't. Because a small part of me, some wild, hungry part, wanted to know too. The next afternoon, I left for the market to buy flowers for my parents' graves. When I returned, I noticed the east corridor door slightly ajar. My heart dropped. I ran. The air inside the corridor was cold, unnaturally cold, like morning dew trapped in a shadow. I pushed the door open wider. The room was empty. But the dust on the floor told me I wasn't the first one there. 2 sets of footprints, barefoot, led from the door to the far corner and back again. Simi and Abu. My chest tightened. I called for them. "Simi. Abu." They came running from the backyard, both panting. Their faces looked too innocent. "Were you in that room?" I demanded. "No, Miss Buchan," Abu said quickly. Simi's eyes darted away. "No, we wouldn't." I didn't believe them. But before I could press further, something strange happened. From inside the forbidden room came a single knock. Once. Loud and hollow. Simi screamed. Abu froze. My knees nearly gave out. I ran forward and slammed the door shut, locking it tight. My hands trembled as I whispered, "You must never go in there again." That night, Simi didn't sing while she worked. Abu didn't speak at all. The air between us was thick with guilt and fear. I didn't ask again, but I could feel something watching us from that locked door. Days passed. The whispers didn't stop. If anything, they grew stronger. Sometimes, I'd find small things moved out of place, my comb on the floor, the curtains tied in knots, a dish broken in the morning when no one had been awake. The servants who still visited began to complain. One even quit, saying she saw a shadow with no body standing near the east wing at dawn. But the worst was what happened on the 3rd night after the ceremony. I woke up to the sound of crying. A woman's voice, soft, broken, coming from down the corridor. I took my lantern and followed the sound, my heart hammering. When I reached the door, I saw Simi standing there, her hand on the lock. "Simi," I hissed. "What are you doing?" She turned slowly, her eyes wide and wet. "Miss Buchan." I heard her calling me. "A woman." She said she's trapped. She begged me to open the door. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She said, "She's your mother." The lantern nearly slipped from my hand. I wanted to shout, to drag Simi away, but before I could speak, the lock clicked. The door creaked open. A rush of cold air swept through the hall, carrying with it a smell, sweet and rotting all at once, like flowers left too long on a grave. The lantern flickered. The room inside was dark. Too dark. My light couldn't pierce it. I took one step forward, whispering, "Mama." Then I heard it. A soft hum. Familiar. My mother's lullaby. Simi gasped. Abu appeared behind her, shouting, "Close it. Close it now." Before I could move, something reached out from the darkness, thin, white, like a hand made of smoke. It brushed Simi's cheek. She screamed and stumbled backward. The door slammed shut by itself with a deafening thud. The sound echoed through the house like a drum of doom. Simi collapsed, trembling. Her skin was cold to the touch. I dragged her to her bed, wrapped her in blankets, and prayed through the night. But she didn't wake until morning. When she finally opened her eyes, she looked at me with terror. "Miss Buchan," she whispered. "I saw her. She's not resting. Your mother, she's still in that room." Simi didn't speak for 2 whole days after that night. She worked like a shadow, quiet, slow, her eyes hollow as empty gourds. When I asked her what she saw in the dark, she just shook her head and whispered, "You wouldn't believe me." But I already did. Because I had seen it too. The pale hand, the blackness that breathed. Something had woken up behind that door, and now it was awake inside my house. Abu blamed himself for not stopping her. I could see it in his eyes, the guilt chewing him up from the inside. He started praying 5 times a day, even adding extra ones at night. I could hear his voice echo softly from the courtyard, trembling through verses, as if he was trying to drown out whatever was whispering in our walls. But prayer did not silence the house. It began with small things, footsteps in empty rooms, whispers in the rafters, utensils falling without touch. The air was never still. The curtains swayed even when there was no wind. And then came the smell. At first faint, like damp earth after rain. Then stronger, rotting flowers and burnt oil. It seeped through the cracks of the forbidden room door, spreading into the halls. I tried everything. I lit incense, sprinkled holy water, sang hymns my mother had taught me. But the air stayed heavy, thick, as if the house itself were holding its breath. One evening, I found Simi sitting outside under the almond tree, staring into nothing. "Simi," I said gently, "tell me what you saw." Her lips trembled. "A woman, Miss Buchan. Dressed in white." Her eyes were closed, but she spoke. She said she was cold. She said she wanted to come home. I felt my heart twist. "Home?" She said she's waiting for her daughter to open the door again. I froze. Because that night, in my dreams, I had seen the same woman. My mother. Standing in the same white cloth, her voice soft and low, whispering, "Let me in." When I woke, I found muddy footprints leading from the forbidden room to my bedside. That was when I realized. It wasn't a haunting. It was an invitation. That morning, Abu found a dead bird near the door. Its wings were stiff, and its beak was open as if it had tried to scream. "We should leave, Miss Buchan," he said, eyes wide with fear. "This house isn't safe anymore." But I couldn't leave. Not yet. Something in me refused. A daughter does not abandon her mother, even if her mother's voice comes from the dark. I told them both to take the day off and rest. They didn't argue. The fear had drained the color from their faces. As soon as they were gone, I went to the east corridor alone. The air there was colder than ever. The door loomed before me like a tomb. I touched it gently, tracing the carvings with my fingertips. They felt different, rougher, almost alive. "Mama," I whispered. Silence. Then a faint tapping from inside. 3 knocks. Slow. Rhythmic. My breath caught in my throat. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. "If you're there, please, let me see you. Just once." Nothing. I turned to leave, when suddenly, the lock fell off by itself. It didn't break or twist, it simply fell. The sound echoed like thunder through the empty corridor. I didn't push the door open. It opened for me. A slow creak, a sigh of release, and the darkness swallowed the light. Inside, the air was colder than a grave. The room was bare, no furniture, no treasure, just walls covered in strange black stains. In the center of the floor was a bowl filled with ashes. And above it, hanging from the ceiling, was a mirror. No, not a mirror. A piece of glass, old and cracked, reflecting nothing. I stepped closer, my lantern shaking in my hand. The flame flickered wildly, throwing shadows across the walls. I saw something move behind me. A shape. Tall. Thin. Dressed in white. I turned slowly. My mouth went dry. It was her. My mother. Or what was left of her. Her skin was grey and wet, her eyes hollow but glowing faintly like dying embers. Her lips moved, but her voice came from everywhere at once. Bucum, my daughter. I fell to my knees. Mama. She smiled, a terrible, broken smile. You called me, and I came. Tears blurred my vision. They said you were gone. The river. The river took my body, she whispered, but not my heart. I stayed here, waiting. I wanted to reach out, to touch her. But her presence felt wrong, cold, like the shadow of something holy that had been twisted. Mama, please rest. Please go back. Her expression changed, twisting into pain. I can't. Not until you finish what I began. I didn't understand. Finish what? She raised her hand and pointed toward the bowl of ashes. Bring them back to the fire, she said. Light it again. Then I'll be free. The lantern shook violently in my grip. What fire? Before she could answer, the flame went out. The room plunged into darkness. I heard her voice one last time, now low, distorted, echoing like thunder underwater. Do not let them stop you. And then she was gone. The door slammed shut, throwing me backward. I hit the floor hard, gasping for air. When I looked up, the door was locked again. The bowl of ashes was gone. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the courtyard, where the morning light was beginning to rise. When Simi saw me, she screamed. Miss Bucum, your hands. I looked down. They were blackened with soot. And in my palm was a handful of ashes. For 3 nights after that, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, my mother's grey smile, her eyes glowing like dying coals, her voice whispering, finish what I began. But what had she begun? What did she mean by bringing the ashes back to the fire? I scrubbed my hands until the skin bled, but the soot never left. The smell of burnt air clung to me like a curse. Simi avoided me. Abu, too. They didn't ask what happened inside that room, but I saw the fear in their eyes whenever I passed. They whispered to each other when they thought I couldn't hear, things about witch fire, the restless dead, the forbidden bloodline. On the 4th morning, Simi finally came to me. Her eyes were red, her voice shaky. Miss Bucum. I dreamed of her again. Your mother. She was standing by my bed. She said she's cold. She said she's hungry. Hungry? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Simi nodded, trembling. She said you promised to feed her. The word stabbed through me like ice. Feed her? Feed what? That night, I lit every lamp in the house. I placed salt on the windowsills, as the elders taught me. But when the wind rose, the lamps flickered, and I heard it again, the same dragging sound from the corridor, slow and patient. I wanted to run, but my feet would not move. I knew where it was going. To the door. When I finally gathered the courage to follow, I found Simi standing there again, barefoot, her eyes glazed like she was half asleep. She was holding a bowl, the same one I had seen in the forbidden room. "Simi," I whispered, "what are you doing?" She turned slowly, her lips trembling. "I'm only helping her." She said if I feed her, she'll stop the whispers. I'm so tired of hearing her name in my dreams. The bowl in her hands began to shake. Something inside it was moving. Obu appeared behind her, shouting, "Drop it. Simi, drop it now." But it was too late. The bowl cracked. A thick, black smoke poured out, swirling, twisting, alive. It rose from the bowl and formed a shape, the shape of a woman. My mother's face flickered within the cloud, her mouth wide open in a silent scream. Simi fell to the floor, convulsing, her eyes rolling back. Obu ran to her, shaking her shoulders. "Wake up, please, wake up." But I could only stare at the figure before me, at my mother's ghost, her voice no longer soft, but sharp, angry, desperate. "You left me," she hissed. "You buried me in that room, locked me away like a shameful secret." "No." I cried, my voice breaking. "It wasn't me. I was just a child." "You knew," she whispered. "You always knew." The walls began to bleed soot. The air grew heavy and hot. The lamps exploded one by one, plunging us into flickering darkness. Obu dragged Simi away, shouting prayers, but the words melted on his tongue. I fell to my knees, sobbing. "Mama, please, I never wanted this." "What do you want from me?" Her form twisted and shook, the air around her vibrating. "Finish it," she said again. "Bring me to the fire." Then I saw it, through the haze, through the smoke, the old stove in the corner of the hall, the one my mother used when she cooked for the poor. It hadn't been used in years. The coals were cold, dead. Something deep in me stirred. Maybe madness. Maybe faith. I stood, took the handful of ashes from my pocket, the ones I had found in my palm after the door closed, and walked to the stove. Obu screamed for me to stop. Simi, barely conscious, whispered, "Don't." But I couldn't stop. I poured the ashes into the old stove and struck a match. The fire caught instantly, too fast, too bright. Flames roared, licking up the walls, twisting into faces. The house shuddered as if alive. My mother's ghost screamed, a sound that cracked the air. She reached toward the fire, her form unraveling like smoke in the wind. "Thank you," she whispered, but it wasn't peace in her voice. It was hunger. The fire spread. It climbed the walls, devoured the curtains, reached the ceiling. I ran to the twins, dragging them toward the courtyard. The heat burned my skin, but I didn't stop until we were outside. Behind us, the house was an inferno, glowing red against the night. We watched in silence as everything burned. And through the roaring flames, I saw her one last time, my mother's face in the fire, smiling. Not the kind smile I remembered, but a wide, knowing grin. When the roof collapsed, the wind carried her laughter into the trees. It sounded free. The next morning, the entire village gathered around the ashes of my home. The elders shook their heads, murmuring prayers. The air still smelled of smoke and sorrow. They asked me what had happened. I told them the truth. I told them my mother was never at peace, that her spirit had been trapped behind the locked door. They didn't believe me. They said I was grieving, that the fire was an accident, that ghosts do not walk among the living. But I knew. The twins left the village that week. Simi never spoke again, and Obu refused to look at me when they said goodbye. I didn't stop them. Now, I live alone on the edge of the forest. Sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, I hear her laughter again, faint, distant, carried through the rustling leaves. And sometimes, when I cook at night, I see a flicker of movement behind the flames, a woman's shadow, stirring the pot with invisible hands. People still whisper about me in the market. They say the girl from the big house lost her mind. They say her cooking smells like the dead. Maybe they're right. But every time I taste my stew, I feel warmth in my chest, and a voice, soft, loving, whispers from the fire, "That's my girl." And I stir the pot and smile. Because even now, I know the truth. Some fires never die. They just wait to be fed.